Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the East Dubuque public hearing for the presentation and discussion of the fiscal year 2026 city budget. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. (25-0436) call to order.
Belkin.
Here.
Bergmeyer.
Here.
Dagenhart.
Here.
Mayor Digman.
Here.
Fleur.
Here.
Meyer. Roby. Here. Attorney Hess.
Here.
New business 25-0437, presentation and discussion of fiscal year 2026 city budget in the city of East Dubuque.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go through a PowerPoint here of just kind of the main goals and overview of the budget itself, and then walk through the budget. I've highlighted the changes for the amendment for the council for later on. So the goals that we set in this budget was to separate the operations budget from the capital budget. This increases transparency and makes the budget much easier to understand. What we learned last year was you have a $137,000 fire budget, and then you drop in a new fire truck and a $400,000 donation, and it's really hard to track what the operating budget is versus the capital budget. So we wanted to split those out so that the budget was easier to understand and read for both us and for the public. Wanted to limit operation spending so we could focus on capital and infrastructure. Limit borrowing to long-term physical infrastructure. Pay cash for capital items with a lifespan of less than 30 years. Pay off market debt early. Build funds to replace vehicles on a rotating basis without new debt. And invest in jobs and tax base. So the first one, separate operations budget from capital. This is how your budget is now laid out. It used to be just these items at the bottom, and everything was pooled together. Now you can, in each of the budget sections, pull out the operating budget and the capital budget and the general fund budget, which is the overall. So when comparing to past years, this number would be the one that would compare all the way through. And you'll notice and one point I'll make at the beginning is throughout the budget, parens around it, as in a negative number, are actually revenue numbers. So they're negative, but they're positive they're negative as it regards to an accountant, but we would view them as positive things because it's the money that offsets the expenditures. So when you look at the revenue line, for instance, on operations here, this is for the administration budget, $2.7 million of revenue, $2.075 million of expenditures, transfers in and out, and then you get the net is $572,000 more of revenue than expenditures in that area. When you go down to the capital side, on this example, you have $422,000 more of expenditures than revenue, and that's just a matter of us spending cash on capital items. So in the capital budget, a number that's larger shows that you're actually spending cash for things. But when we put the two of them together, you've got a plus $149,000 budget. So, I'm sorry, this is the grand total at the bottom of the whole budget. So, as the example. So, next one, jump in with any questions among the council members. Next one is limiting operations spending to focus on capital and infrastructure. And these are the budgets over the past number of years. But for this year, is the final column. And our expenditures are overall below our operating expenditures, the operations budget, are well below our revenue. The money that we save on operations then is shifted over to capital purchases, which is our goal. Limit borrowing to long-term physical infrastructure. Pay cash for capital items with less than a 30-year lifespan. This budget only borrows for capital items that exceed a 30-year lifespan. In other words, that would be water projects, sewer projects, and our building project across the street. This budget only borrows for the emergency services building and state-subsidized low-interest loans for sewer and water infrastructure. So we aren't borrowing in this budget for anything else. Approximately 1/3 of the cost of the emergency services building will be paid in cash. That's out of TIF. The remainder will be paid either by a state grant, which the fire department's applied for, or by the bond that was approved by the council. So instead of borrowing about $12 million for the full cost of separate, misspelling, fire station and police stations, we'll borrow about $3 million for the combined station and restore a 133-year-old fire station. Pay off market rate debt early. So we've got, as we talked about last week, two kinds of debt in terms of interest rates. There are subsidized interest rates, which is generally either the state loan of 0% for a fire truck, or water and sewer, which are at rates plus or minus of 1%, well below market. The things we have that were above market, our goal is to pay those off early. So last week, based on the council action, we paid off the mortgage on City Hall early. That was going to be a balloon payment due in September, which probably would have more than doubled our interest rate at that time, from the time that that mortgage was taken out. Had we been in a situation financially and in terms of cash that we were in a couple of years ago, we probably would have been forced to take whatever interest rate we could get and extend that mortgage. As it stands now, by paying that off, we save about $19,000 a year in mortgage payments, and that is money that can be put toward buying down other debt. So building funds to replace vehicles on a rotating basis without new debt. Our goal is to build towards saving annually to replace vehicles with cash instead of borrowing. So we started off in the current fiscal year by putting a down payment on by going for our second fire vehicle to a used vehicle. So that brought us from about $1 million expenditure down to around $400,000, all tricked out. And we paid the down payment in the current fiscal year, and in the coming fiscal year, probably in June, this budget would pay $327,000 of cash for the new truck. And so we will intend to not take out borrowing for that. You can see this is the line from the budget that shows that second fire truck used $327,719. So this is the first rule of holes, which is when you're in one, stop digging. So before we can turn around and pay off debt, the first thing we have to do is stop taking out market rate debt. And so this is a good first step at that. The fire trucks have a useful life of over 20 years. So by buying a 10 or 12-year-old truck, we set up a rotation so that we're able to purchase a new truck every 10 or 12 years instead of waiting 20 to 25 years and having to buy 2 trucks at once, which would pretty much require borrowing. In our upcoming budgets, we'll be able to, now we're using this to pay off all of this initial truck, and then the plan is in future budgets to set up accounts to allow us to have a good share of a new vehicle paid for, saved up by the time we need the vehicle. And so that's the rotation we're talking about. So we're also doing the same with police and fire vehicles. As we talked about in the last budget, we put in $40,000 for a police cruiser to replace one of our vehicles there. We made the decision, instead of doing that, to build cash and be able to do things like buy down the mortgage on this building. So we've put the money, and because we had unanticipated expenditures in police, those things kind of affected that. So we've got the money in the next budget. We've also got that amount in the Public Works budget. They've got several vehicles, and it's a question of which vehicle is going to need to be replaced first. But at least we're at the point of using cash to do those things. So this would be investing in growing jobs. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we had theoretical balances in our TIF accounts, but we had no cash to be able to encourage development. Now we have completely restored our TIF funds by bringing the city back into the black. And so the balances right now in our TIF accounts as of the 25th, the TIF 1 is the downtown TIF. That one's been spent down on the ESB, Emergency Services Building. And then TIF 2 and TIF 3 have these levels of balances. Also, I note that the TIF revenue for this year, these are from the budget, are increasing. We just got the numbers from the county, and the TIF revenue is up about 32% in 1 year. So that means that we'll take in, I think, about $650,000. I'm anticipating that we'd be spending about $700,000 on the ESB to avoid debt on that. And so we're practically able to cover that expenditure without drawing down the TIF amounts. The TIF is going to be something we're going to have to monitor closely, because we want to be able to encourage development, encourage improvements, both infrastructure and with our facades and things. We don't want to nickel and dime this fund down too much, because we also want to be able to encourage that big development, either housing, commercial, industrial, whatever it happens to be, that we can push over the line by taking advantage of the fact that we have TIF cash, which most people don't have. But we also have to be aware that there's an end coming to the TIFs. The downtown TIF ends in, I believe, 2030, TIF 2 in 31, and TIF 3 in about 36, I believe it is. So those would be things we have to, as we're drawing down those amounts, we still want to maintain enough to be able to do something big for development in East Dubuque. There are a lot of needs. So that is the overview. Any questions on those items? And I think a lot of that comes from discussions that we've had at council, discussions that I've had with you individually, and I feel pretty comfortable that the priorities that are listed here are the priorities that I've been hearing from the council and from the mayor and the public. So with that.
I have a question, Bob.
Yeah.
So the TIF 1 balance, does that include all the agreements we've made with these developments that have come down here on Main Street?
So this is the balance we have today, which we paid one of the agreements. There's another agreement to be paid. So we have not paid on the Culbys. They haven't put their numbers in yet, but we have paid on the other building. And we've got another one for the Midtown that's still out there. That's a smaller one. So we budget for those in the expenditures, somewhat of a guess, but I'm anticipating another one of those kind of agreements coming forward in the budget. But the biggest expenditure is the roof and the asbestos and those parts of that project. So when we get to the budget, we'll talk about it too, but we're transferring money into that TIF from the other TIFs, proposing that in the budget. So this is the budget. So what I've done here, I think I mentioned that there would be updates and amendments that I'd offer. So one of the motions that's on the agenda for tonight is the amendments to the budget that was placed out for the public last week and distributed to you. I've noted those in red as we go through. And so when we get done going through the budget, then I would hope we could have an amendment to accept the amendments, and then also then we'd be on to the budget that I handed out to you today. So we've gone through, went through this last week, but we'll go through it again. This is the administration budget. The big changes here, up here on the corporate tax, that's our property tax payment. If you recall, in December, we shifted around our the funding coming in from the property tax, and that grew this number a bit. Otherwise, we have estimates. This is for the major changes, the cannabis licenses. As we know, we're having 3 dispensaries. Those are all coordinated to come up at the same time on June 1st. So if you look at the current year, these are prorated payments to get everybody on the same schedule for a June 1st payment. And so from this point forward, it'll be the three $25,000 payments due on June 1st. Building permits, I got very conservative with because we don't currently have Culbys or some of the major multi-million-dollar Leibold and things like that are very large ones. I would anticipate, I would hope that this would become a larger number, but I wanted to be conservative with this budget. The sales tax, I just took the growth in each of the last 3 years' budgets and applied it here. It's been about $27,000 a year for the last 3 years. Depending on the growth in the dispensaries, those are directly tied to this. I did not, but it's also intermeshed in previous years. So I didn't want to double count, so I just took the growth from the previous years, and I'm not estimating a sales tax directly tied to the dispensaries. Get to the dispensary amount here. It's throwing a dart at a dartboard. We don't have any numbers to show us what's going to happen going from 1 dispensary to 3. I think you can anticipate that there's an increase in revenue, and we'll have 3 companies marketing and doing all that. But we have no actual facts to base a number on. So I think that I was being very conservative in this number. I anticipated a 30% growth in revenue based on tripling the number of dispensaries. So I would I would imagine that they would be disappointed if their revenue grew by this level. I don't think that's probably in their business plan, but it is in our business plan because I don't want to anticipate a higher, something higher than we're going to actually take in. So this, I think, is a conservative number, but it is, I will also be very upfront in saying that it's a guess. This number for miscellaneous income, in the previous year, we had miscellaneous income from the sale of, we cleared out a lot of stuff, fire equipment, fire trucks, and public works vehicles and things like that. And it helped us put money toward capital expenditures for the current year. And this year, I included a small amount of that, but then the sale of the water tower property, which should be plus or minus of $60,000. And going down the line, I would take, we're holding on the current year budgets, so salary budgets are adjusted for actuals and bonuses. The health insurance is a shot in the dark. Also, I think I'm being conservative in a 7.5% increase estimate, which we carried through the whole budget. And I think those are the main. They get down. This is the first one that's in red. This is an adjustment to the budget that was handed out last week, and that's the $182,000 payment for the paying off City Hall. So we had a number in the budget. That was the estimate based on the monthly, but this is the number that actually is the amount that the payoff was on that particular day last Tuesday. And so that's an adjustment there. Police budget. So then when you get down to the administration, we're anticipating, if you take the previous couple of years, go back to 2023, we are still below what was being spent in the 2023 budget. And so we've brought these numbers down and we're holding them down while revenue is increasing, which is where you get the larger number here for which funds the rest of our operational budgets. Going on to the police budget, the main difference here, there was a correction made here in the police resource officer. That is a revenue. That's for the money we get from the school district and from the donation account, donations. I didn't have the parentheses around it, so it recorded it as an expenditure instead of a revenue source. So I show that correction there. And then the school resource officer here is adjusted to reflect the full cost of the officer. So that is just a matter of kind of the proper way to do budgeting. This is, you take the full cost as an expenditure, and then you take the offset of that number as a revenue source. So those two changes are reflected there. This number we increased to, there's been discussion of a program for our officer education and our manual for conduct and things. And so the chief's done a lot of research on that, on what's best in that area for a small department. And so this includes the cost for that. I would include the cost of this in here, but we're not ready to come forward with the proposal, so you'll have a chance to discuss the various programs that are available here. So there's money in the budget for this, but that does not mean we're spending it until the council acts to approve a program, if you approve a program. And that's the majority of this money. I think 2,500 was in there in your budget, and the 11,000 is the addition for the program that we will bring forward in the future here, in the near future. This is the expenditure for the police cruiser, which, again, you can see it in the current year's budget, but it was not an expenditure that was made. This would anticipate replacing one of our vehicles. And we may replace it with, what I would like to do is replace it with a used vehicle so that we kind of get onto the rotation in the police vehicles like we're doing with fire vehicles. Of course, they don't last as long, but you can still do a rotation so that you're able to accrue the money and pay cash and have the money available. Any other questions in police? Otherwise, we'll move on to fire. So the only major changes, or there's no changes from what you had in fire. That big number is here, equipment acquisition. So here you saw the purchase of the new vehicle last year, as well as other equipment that came from the large donation that came in, and the down payment on the second fire vehicle, which I believe was about $90,000.
One quick question on that. Where, as far as like the fire truck loan payments, what's left after this year for the one that we have?
So we've got a zero interest loan that we aren't going to pay off because it's free money, not free in terms of interest rate. But the truck, that truck, we took out a 3-year loan. This is the payment for that, $110,000 a year, and it's 3 years. So we paid off 1 year, and then after this budget, we'll have one more. That would be, in my mind, the next priority to knock off in terms of knocking down our existing debts that are at market rates. That's the highest interest rate loan we have. But like I said, we couldn't pay cash at that time, but now but we didn't want to borrow for very long. So these are high payments, and I would like to think we could knock this out with some good luck this year. We thought about buying it down in the current year, but with the bonds coming up for the ESB, we thought that it was more important to have some cash account in order to make our financials look good, for the bonds. So we decided not to buy down that one currently. I will say that if there wasn't a balloon payment on the mortgage on this building, this is the loan. This is what we would have paid off fully this year, because it's higher interest rate. But because they did a balloon payment that comes up in the middle of this year, it forced our hands to buy off the mortgage instead of buying down this one. So that's a little bit disappointing, but that's where we're at with that. This number is the remainder of the payment for the second vehicle, the used vehicle, and this is that. When you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. We're able to pay cash for that. I would say that when you start to add up where we're at financially, so we pay off the mortgage, that frees up $19,000. This is paid for with cash. That means that cash is available in the next budget to do something else. So every time we use a dollar in a given budget to pay down a capital expenditure, that's money that's available in the next budget. Plus, you have the payments that you would have made in that budget. And so it's kind of a snowball effect that we're trying to build here. Going to the next budget, we will have these dollars. These dollars can then go to pay off this loan. We pay off that loan early, either at the end of this fiscal year, hopefully, or the beginning of the next. And now you've got $110,000 additional that can go toward snowballing to pay off the sweeper and the Vactor and get those done early. So that's the goal here, is kind of building this snowball. But all the money that goes for capital purchases, paying cash, is money that's available the next year. So if you take the the police cruiser, if we don't buy it, we can put that money, part of that money aside, and be able to, for a smaller amount, rotate the police vehicles, for instance. If we figure we buy a police vehicle every third year, you only need a third of the money, and so the rest of that money can go toward buying down debt. If that makes sense, everybody? Moving to the ambulance. The correction here was here in the projection for the current year. I missed the payment for the ambulance, so that was a $10,000 change there. I think we talked about last time, we increased the fees for the ambulance. That would be the major change in revenue. That is keeping up with what are normal charges for other ambulances. Moving to the public works in revenue. So this one is in red because the actual came in $134.68 higher than my estimate on the projection. So that's the change there. It's $245,134.68. And the other, changes in these budgets, in this one as well as in the water, for instance, are the impacts of retirements. And those play out in this area on the budget, as well as in insurance. Again, replacing a vehicle as needed. Tony's making some recommendations for the first vehicle that needs to be replaced over there. When I did this, I was anticipating that there are multiple trucks over there that the large dump trucks could go. One of them could go at any time, but the sense is that we don't need to have three, and so we'll probably replace a smaller vehicle that's the workhorse for plowing and salting. But that's the money that's held there for that. Moving on. So this is the overall general fund operations. We're plus $572,000. When you take the money out for the capital, again, there's that fire truck. There are the payments for the other fire truck. It pulls that number down, but we're still positive of $149,000. I believe the overall structural deficit in operations is a little over $300,000. So we are continuing to make progress on bringing down the operations. So we are positive in money overall. We are in the black as a city in total, but in various accounts we still have to make adjustments, and so we come out positive on the general fund, both in what's projected for the end of this year and what's projected for this budget. Moving through, we adjusted some of the numbers for audit and things like that to come closer to so that's the number from here. We're at 14,000, so our audits run about 20,000. So we shot for being able to fully fund an audit. We're within a couple $100. So there's nothing too remarkable, I think, in these. If anybody's got a question on FICA or any of those, those are generally payments that we just are required to make. IMRF, you might notice, is down in our estimates, and that's a result of fewer employees. The biggest one here is playgrounds. Look at here, we were taking in over 19,000 a year and not spending any of it. So we have a surplus in that account. But because of all the work that was done last year that exceeded the budgeted level, so this is the expenditures we made for the playgrounds last year, which we still have a net balance in the account, but we brought it down by about 58,000. So now we brought down the amount for playgrounds as a whole to about 5. I don't think we're going to have very many expenditures to make there. I anticipate this to be a year where we replace the seats on swings and maybe some backboards and things like that. But people seem fairly happy with the changes that have been made in the playgrounds. The MFT is another one where we've built a balance. It's a very limited amount of things we can spend money on. And so generally, if you look, the money we have to request this of the DOT. We take the money for streetlights and we take the money for salt. This year, we've requested additional dollars for streets, and we have not heard back from DOT yet whether they'll approve that. But it's necessary to by shifting some street expenditures over to MFT. It lets us bring down the balance on MFT and save money somewhere else to either or increase the spending on streets. But we have that option then. And as I think we've talked about in the past, it's always best to spend out of the accounts that are the most limited and save the accounts that are less limited because it keeps your flexibility intact. So that's what we're requesting there. Again, there's nothing much coming down here. These are small accounts. The half-cent non-home rule sales tax, we just have a number in there for streets. I'm not sure if I'd rather spend out of MFT than spend all out of this because we have a negative balance in the half-cent sales tax that we need to, over time, try to address. This account 31 here is a new account that was just set up, and it was set up for the bonding. Up to this point, we were going to put the bonding in our regular debt accounts, but we thought it's a different enough thing that for transparency's sake, we should break it out. So I've got the amount in this side for that. We do need to place into the budget the other side of this, and that's a question for Cindy, our CPA. So as we talked about, I'm anticipating about $3 million in bonding. We'll have a better number probably when we go to bid, which would be the end of May or beginning of June. And we also have the option of spending more because we've taken in more in TIF than we anticipated. We could take some more out of that. But so there will be everything in a budget has a debit and a credit side. So this is just showing the revenue that we're taking in, or the expenditure for the building acquisition, and then the other side of that will be in the budget. So does that make sense? We have to place the rest of that expenditure, but it's all for the ESB. Moving down to the TIF, you got the red there because I had estimated the increase in TIF funding based on previous year's increases. The increase that we actually got this year exceeds that in each one of the TIFs. So we've placed the new dollars in there. So this is where we see the $645,000 of TIF revenue for the three TIFs combined, which is about 32% over the current fiscal year. So that plays out in each of the TIF accounts. And then we have here the TIF, the primary TIF spending right now is out of TIF 1, the downtown TIF. And that is where you see here is the TIF expenditure for the ESB. So Gene, here's your number for development agreements. This is what was spent in the current year on development agreements, and this is the anticipated for the coming year. That would be one $50,000 one. I forget exactly what the number is for the Midtown, but I think it's below 20. But it's already I can't remember the exact number, but anyway, it's built in here along with the projection for something else happening. I would hope that we would keep the ball rolling like we have been down here and require that. So that's where that shows up. Does that answer your question on that? Okay. And then so the other TIFs, contiguous TIFs can shift money among them. And because we've got the major expenditures going out from the downtown TIF, we anticipate transfers. That's what's showing up here on TIF 2 and here in TIF 3. These monies come into the downtown TIF primarily to fund the ESB. And so we have a positive balance in each of the TIFs. I will say that when you get to, for instance, the TIF 3, you'll notice that the revenue coming in at $357,000, we are not drawing down that account by very much to shift money over for the ESB. That is one where the revenue is coming in very hard. Any more questions on TIF? That's a lot. Moving to ARPA. This is the ARPA grant that was received in 2021. And it was designated for the Hiawatha lift station. So that's what the federal government was told we were spending it on. It started about $212,000. Expenditures have been made for engineering and things out of that. And this is the remainder of that account, which is all going into the Hiawatha lift station project, which we anticipate being in this fiscal year. This is the, when I talked about the other side of each of the expenditures, these are the payments on the debts we have now. So if you're interested in, kind of what we can buy down, we make $64,000 a year payments on the sweeper. You'll see City Hall is zeroed out. I think we're finished with the EMS, with the ambulance, I believe. In the treatment plant, we pay $176,700 a year on that. The other major ones, Public Works, that'd be the Vector truck. This is the 3-year loan on the first fire truck, and $117,000 on the water tower. So these are the payments on the major payments we have, and as you can see, several of them can be drawn down. If you take the sweeper, the Vector, and the fire truck, it should cover virtually all of the payment for the bonding, and maybe a little extra, so that the balance that we've been carrying forward and able to put into capital, that won't be eaten up by the bond if we manage to snowball this and take down these other payments. Again, we anticipate doing this particularly on the payments that are at market rate and above. It's another question about paying off things that are long-term subsidized interest rate. That's a financial decision that we aren't ready to make yet. I'd love to be able to make a decision like that today. Does that make sense? This is the water account. I think I'm being conservative on the water. I'm only estimating that we'll get 1% growth in the water receipts. That'll be the usage. And I'm not anticipating any other increases, despite the fact that we've got a couple new businesses and things like that. When you get down to the engineering, that's the Highway 35. And you've got, on the Highway 35 project, you've got TIF, and you've got the payment from Leibold for their 44%. So down here we've got the Highway 35 project, and I note in here, I tried to do it in red, but I haven't changed the number here to reflect this because the bid just came in, and you'll consider it tonight on the water main extension. The engineer estimated it at $310,000. The low bid came in at $393,000. So that's an adjustment that we'll have to make, which will impact both TIF and the Leibold payment. But I can't tell what that's going to be because there are some costs that are ours alone and other like connections to our businesses and homes and things. And so that'll shake out, but that'll be, this number will be a little higher based on the bids coming in higher. But also we have Oxford and Hiawatha Water. This is the water tower and the overhead payment that goes to the administration budget. That overhead payment is for billing and the Tony, my time, all their costs for the city hall. So it's actually probably should be a lot higher than $30,000, but that's been what has been taken out for each year. And these funds aren't in a healthy enough shape, I think, we'd like to get a little balance built up in them. So water, we anticipate having a net in operations of almost $250,000. The capital is going to cost something, and this number is primarily the other revenue coming in from Leibold and from TIF. And so overall, we would anticipate water growing. This year, we had a rough year on water last year, and it was negative. This year, we anticipate it being positive. As you know, things like that can change pretty fast, as they did last year. But this is our best estimates. So opportunity to build up our balance a little bit there. But we're still pretty close to the edge on that. Sewer, we have, again, this is Indian Hills, this is the ARPA, the state grant for Indian Hills, 2.2 million, plus the ARPA, which is applied to Hiawatha, and that comes in under grants. And then our regular sewer charges, again, I just estimated a 1% increase. Loan proceeds from Hiawatha, Family Beer, lift stations, and Oxford sewer. Remember, Oxford we will get state money. We anticipate getting state money for Oxford for sewer and water. And so this is where you get to the full cost of those projects. I will say that the Indian Hills, this is the engineer's estimate, $1.95 million for Indian Hills. The actual approved bid is significantly lower, below 1.5. So we're trying to see if we can spend more of that grant by extending the sewer service a little bit further. I'm not sure if that's possible. So sewer, this number in capital is positive primarily because of the there was so much money on engineering for 3 different plan changes on Indian Hills, and if we're able to recover all those in the grant, then that'll be a big improvement for the sewer budget, which is in deficit currently. This would bring it to a positive long-term total in sewer. Garbage is basically even until you take out the payment for the transfer. So that's something that'll have to be adjusted in the future, but I think we can go through this year on that. This is the grand total. So operations, you're plus $763,000 overall. That's operations for enterprise as well as all the operating side. This is a negative, and as we talked about, the negative here is because you're spending cash. And so we started this year, I believe we're sitting right now at about 1.7 plus million in cash. So this would draw down our total cash account by about that amount. But of course, the vast majority of this is ARPA, and it is TIF expenditures. So TIF is something, as we talked about, it's not a surprise that we're drawing down TIF, and also we have to spend the ARPA this year, or we are in trouble with our friends in Washington. So that is the budget. Any questions? So that would be, if anyone wants to testify, but.
All right, thank you. Part of the public hearing, 24-0438, speakers from the floor. There are none noted. 25-0439, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call.
Vulcan.
Aye.
Burgmeyer.
Aye.
Dagenhart.
Aye.
Fleur.
Aye.
Meyer. Roby.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Benny, we just adjourned. How come we didn't do that?
This is, the rest was, this was just public
I didn't, okay.
hearing.
Thought we were gonna talk about appointing.
Oh,
The bids came in already.